Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. The reason why George Russell's engine failed during the Australian Grand Prix has been revealed, and it's not looking good for Mercedes. Rumour has it that it was the cylinder failure within the ICE. That means that's a write-off. There's going to be a new internal combustion engine come Baku, but they might also have to replace the hybrid battery side of the power unit as well. Especially bad because Mercedes still don't know what caused it and fear that it might therefore happen again. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. A cool picture actually of George Russell and Novak Djokovic here. And apparently they were discussing a little bit about the sustainability of the calendar. Apparently Russell's told Djokovic that drivers are urging Formula 1 to organise the calendar better. It still doesn't really make sense how we go from, Australia, then to Baku, then to Miami, then back to Europe, and we do the tour over there. Then we're off to the Americas again, and then back to the Middle East, right? It's all like, what's going on here? And Formula 1 talk all this good stuff about sustainability, and they're going to try and, push this going in the right direction going forwards, but then they just add new races to the calendar, and still the way they're organised, the fact that we go to Canada and then back to Europe again, the long haul flights involved, and all these type of stories is not a particularly good look, and George Russell has been making that point to be known. Some other discussion as well from Alpha Tauri. We heard the rumours from Nick De Vries the other day that they don't have a major radical overhaul of their car, but they have 5 or 6 steps plans to upgrade their floor, which is, their car's very weak right now. Yuki Tsunoda's doing a great job to even put it in contention for points at times, so there's a lot more to come, I think, from that team going forwards. Or maybe there's not. Maybe they'll just sell it off to Honda or something. That'll be an exciting prospect within the next couple of years. Speaking of, former Honda team McLaren, Hamilton has given his thoughts on the state of the current Mercedes team with some of the challenges they have faced over the last couple of years. We know that McLaren have been struggling for some time. They made some serious changes just a couple of weeks ago now. James Key is gone. Many other individuals from the technical department there at McLaren either gone as well, or it's being entirely restructured. They're making serious technical moves to try and reignite the potential campaign they want to have going forward. Hamilton, of course, knows a thing or two about McLaren. He was there in the past, but he says, look, you can't compare us to McLaren. We have won 8 world titles out of the last 10 years. McLaren is an old home for me. It's old family, so I'm always looking to see where they are and hoping they figure things out and become the team they once were, the team I know them as being in their earlier days. But we, that being Mercedes, still a world championship winning team. We've got amazing people who have been with us on that journey. We always need to hold ourselves accountable, each and every single one of us. We need to look at how we go about things, how we can do better. There's not a single person who thinks they've done everything right and couldn't do things better, need to improve our communication. And basically what he's saying is we're an open-minded team, and I thought this quote was pretty interesting actually, because if you've got a group of people who are just super stuck in their ways and don't change, then you will just stay in that area of being non-competitive. So maybe looking a bit at what McLaren have experienced and understanding why they're making technical changes, and basically saying this team is still good, one of the best, if not the best in Formula 1, and, still where he wants to be, of course, for pretty much, I'm sure, the entirety of the rest of his career, but saying that Mercedes don't need any technical changes, as McLaren have done. And speaking of potential McLaren changes, I know there was some discussion about this, because rumours were circulating around about, 6th of April, let's say, about a week or so ago, that further changes are coming from McLaren, and they are hiring new signings from around the sport. Red Bull, Mercedes, Aston, wherever they can find people, they're going to try and hire them into McLaren as they rejuvenate their technical department of the team. And some people thought, are they going to sign Adrian Newey, just because Adrian Newey's contract was rumoured to be up, and I believe it is up as it stands. And there were some questions, would he stay on at Red Bull? Is he going to retire? Is he going to go to another team? Because his contract was at an end. And as we understand, right, Adrian Newey is a consultant technically for Red Bull. He is signed up through his own company on an arrangement like that, so they can skirt the cost cap somehow or another, because he's a contractor, so they can, funnel the numbers in whatever way, and I'm sure all the teams are doing something similar. However, Horner was asked the question, right, what about Adrian Newey? Is he going to stay on? Because we know that Newey's been a crucial part of many championship winning cars, surely the most ever of any designer in a kind of world championship history, been with Red Bull for some time now, and was asked the question, is Newey going to retire? What's he planning to do? Horner says his heart is very much still in Formula 1. We don't talk about contracts or longevity of contracts, but he will be here for many years to come. Maybe they don't talk about contracts because, they're somewhat in a grey area, let's just say, but still, he'll be here for many years to come. The full quote said, of course, there's always speculation in the paddock. F1 is like that. He's a key figure in our stable, and obviously is very popular. Other teams would most certainly want an Adrian Newey. We know he gets a lot of credit, and I'm sure other members of his team also deserve a lot of credit for the way the car has been designed, but, he wrote that famous book about how to build a car, and he certainly knows a thing or two to about the ground effect era that we are now presiding in. So yes, it's crucial for us to have him in the team. He is extremely involved in the long-term project. So stating very clearly that Adrian Newey is not going away anytime soon and is going to be part of their team for the long term, which is, I'm sure, concerning in part to the opposition, but nonetheless expected from the Red Bull camp. Let's talk then about some of Mercedes' problems. So firstly, we know the cockpit position has been frustrating Lewis Hamilton, and there was some analysis done on exactly why this had to be the way that it is. We know that in comparison to the other cars, such as the Red Bull, where the cockpit is significantly further back, as you guys can see on the graphic, to where Hamilton or Russell would sit. Russell doesn't seem to struggle with this as much as Hamilton does, but Hamilton said that it's very frustrating, feels like he has no control over the rear of the car, and various other issues as a result. And we wondered, why have Mercedes designed the car like this then? Their cockpit is the furthest forward of any team. Why is that the case? Red Bull must know something about having their cockpit further rearward. Now, it seems that the side pod design has resulted in this to a certain degree. It's all to do with like weight balance of the car, and I think with the way the side pods were being designed, it meant that in order to properly balance the car and achieve the weight distribution that they wanted, they had to move the cockpit further forward with this concept. So I think, again, it was a trade-off that they were going for. They felt like the side pod design with the zero pods was going to be the most effective, but as a result, they've had to make some concessions elsewhere, and concessions that haven't really been backed up by better performance from what they were trying to achieve with this particular design. It seems like some of the side elements of the car are positioned in such a way with the zero pod design that if they didn't have a zero pod design, maybe there's more weight rearwards, and therefore they can move the driver slightly rearward as well to counterbalance that. It seems like with the side pod design as it is, there's slightly more weight rearward than they would have otherwise, especially in where certain positions or certain parts have to be positions, and therefore to counteract that, they have to move the driver somewhat further forwards. For example, this year they kind of brought the entrance of the side pod slightly further back, which might have resulted in some slight weight shifting towards the rear of the car, which means they had to have the driver even slightly further forward than he was last year, which is not optimal, it seems, for the performance of the Mercedes. But it's not just their car concept, and this is something, the cockpit position, that they're not really going to be able to change this season. They can change the side pod design, they can tweak other things, and I'm sure they will try in order to resolve the problems that Hamilton is suffering with, especially in qualifying when the car is absolutely on the limits. But there are other problems to resolve as well, especially when it comes to their engine failure they had for George Russell. This was a big surprise to many. Russell had a phenomenal weekend. He nailed it in qualifying, was even thinking he could have got pole actually over Max Verstappen, was not too far away of doing exactly that. And then in the race was great at the first stint, pitted under the kind of the safety car for good reason, then it became a red flag, screwed his race, but still he recovered well and could have been on for at least a P4, if not a podium finish, possibly, depending on how things went with how well he was driving. But his race was brought to an abrupt end, and we know that every race so far this season, there's been some significant reliability problems. We talked yesterday about Red Bull's issues with their gearbox. Even Nick de Vries had some issues with his power unit that he had to replace in Jeddah. We've seen the Ferrari engine have some issues so far, certainly the control electronics on Charles Leclerc's car. Even Nico Hülkenberg, after the race ended in Australia, had an MGU-K issue. So all the teams are suffering, but Mercedes, after having a bulletproof power unit last year, that's not the case this year. Lando Norris had issues with his power units back in Bahrain. They had to replace the entire thing. Of course, Lance Stroll, his engine broke down relatively early on in Saudi Arabia. And then George Russell's, a different scenario, but nonetheless still an engine failure in Australia, which put an end to a very promising race. Now, we discussed yesterday that it was unknown what had happened here. It's now been determined via the analysis at Mercedes headquarters that it was a cylinder failure. So, it's a V6 engine, right? One of the 6 cylinders failed. They don't exactly know why it failed, but the engine is clearly dead and buried, right? There's no coming back for that particular internal combustion engine, but also some concerns here that Motorsport Italy report on that indeed there might also be problems with a fresh hybrid system, or the hybrid system that was in the car, i.e. the battery, the MGU-H, the MGU-K, the energy store, this type of stuff, was also damaged to a certain extent by the fire or the combustion that was going on in the internal combustion engine, and therefore they might need a fresh one of those as well. So already on the, 4th race of the year, Russell is going to be on his 2nd power unit. That's of course not ideal, and the issue is the engineers don't really know what cause led to this. So there's positives, I guess, to Mercedes in that they have a few weeks to figure out why. After Australia, a massive break now up until Baku, they can spend a lot of their time diagnosing this and figuring out why this was the case and what they might need to change going forwards. But nonetheless, still a big concern for Mercedes, right, that they don't really know why this cylinder in his engine gave up. Now, we know that Mercedes are probably pushing their engine more more to the limit now than they were before. Last year they had a bulletproof but admittedly rather slow engine until towards the end of the year. We heard all this from their engine department that they'd brought some software upgrades to the car which enabled them to run their engine at higher rates effectively. We know what Ferrari did. Start of the year their engine was on 100% pretty much, and then that came back to bite them quite quickly, and possibly in order to catch up to the Red Bull, in order to compete with the Ferraris and the Aston Martins, Mercedes have amped up their power unit, and it does seem like they have, based on their straight line speed. They've made some gains in that sense, as the other teams have as well, possibly around them, but it also has the consequence of their engine maybe being less reliable, and this was the reason last year, Mercedes, why they were able to pick up many podiums, because when Ferrari DNF'd, when Ferrari messed up their strategy, they were always there to pick up the pieces. This year, even when they're quite fast, and even with Sergio Perez having a stinker of a qualifying, they're still not there to pick up all the pieces because George Russell's engine blew up, and therefore they don't even have as many points this year as they did last year. So even if Russell finished, then they would have had more this year than they did last year. So it's very interesting for Mercedes. Their reliability has been frankly unbelievable in the entire turbo hybrid era, far and away the best team ever in terms of reliability that we've ever had in Formula 1 history. So to have 3 engine issues on 3 different cars, all Mercedes powered in the first 3 races, is a big concern, and especially if they don't fully know what caused it. Is that going to mean they're going to have to turn down their engine? Will they have to make some other kind of concessions as a result? Because as we discussed yesterday, if there's any team that's going to be able to take down Red Bull, it's going to be because of Red Bull's reliability issues, if there are any going forwards, but you need to finish the race in order to capitalize on those, and Mercedes haven't shown too much confidence that they can do that so far, more than the other teams around them, let's say, as they were around about this time last year. But very much intrigued your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.